Welcome back. In the second video I would like to talk to you about serious games, and the name already covers most of the definition. So serious games tend to be digital games. It's something that really emerged when video games started gaining popularity, and they're used for purposes other than mere entertainment. So this doesn't mean that they're not entertaining. On the contrary, they do include this entertaining component in order to keep people engaged. But they also have a serious purpose on top of that they try to address. So these are one of the more complicated types of games to create because you're always balancing the entertainment part to make sure that the game is fun to play, but at the same time making sure that the serious goal is also achieved. So this could also apply to games that are not designed with a serious goal in mind but are used in a serious context. An example of that would be that some surgeons are known to play games before surgery to kind of warm up and to train their motor skills. Another example would be that some teachers tend to use commercial games, entertainment games, with their students to introduce certain topics. So there are games that deal with all kinds of different topics, and you could nicely kick off a discussion by having students play the games or by playing the game with students. Before going into the content of the lecture. So some examples of application domains of serious games include skills training and simulation. This is an example of a healthcare professional in training that is using virtual reality to simulate a certain medical procedure. And this is of course a lot safer than having someone inexperienced practice directly on a live human being. So this is a way for games to kind of bridge this experience gap where you're just starting out learning how to do certain procedures that could be quite dangerous if done improperly, and by safely practicing those in a virtual environment first. Kind of related to that is this virtual environment, which is about risks of falling. So in this game, in the serious game, you are placed in a certain context and you need to explore and identify potential risks of falling for example, people working on the rooftop. And on top of identifying these potential risks, you're also asked to inspect the safety equipment, like the harnesses here. And by repeating these processes in the virtual environment, you get to prepare yourself and train for when these situations occur in real life and where there's actually something at stake. Another example of serious games are in the field of physical therapy. So in this example, you're again placed in a virtual world through virtual reality, and you're invited to look around and explore the environment, which makes you look in different directions and move your neck in certain ways. I've also seen an example of hand rehabilitation, where the participant or the player is asked to navigate an avatar with their hand, and the game invites them and stimulates them to move their hand in a healthy and good way to help their recovery in a playful way. So some other purposes include persuasion, so stimulating people to use healthy behavior. Education is a really big field in which a lot of serious games are applied. They can also be used to involve people and give them a sense of empowerment. So for example, somewhere in the Netherlands, the municipality was designing a new playground, and they invited children to create their ideal playground in Minecraft and to share it with them. And then from all of these submissions, they chose a winning one, and that one was actually created into the real life physical playground. So it's a way of empowering people living in your municipality in a playful way. So training and preparation we talked about, and also the physical activity and rehabilitation is a big one. So basically what it comes down to, if you think about serious games, it adds to some of the definitions I think that we discussed previously about games in general. So these 6 criteria, because rather than having these negotiable real life outcomes, here we are kind of aiming for these real life outcomes. So we want people to rehabilitate, we want them to be physically active, or we want to present them with new knowledge or information. So in other words, what we're aiming for is a transfer between what happens in the game world and into something in the real world, either a change of mindset, new knowledge gained, or concrete skills and confidence in acting out medical procedures. So all of these ways of extracting something from the game world is called transfer. So what we could do is we could consider serious games as being simulations of some aspects of what we know in real life. We usually give it the look and feel of a game, which makes it look more entertaining and more playful. But under the hood, there is a simulation of some real-world events or processes. So this doesn't mean that a game has to exactly replicate everything that we know from real life, but especially when it comes to the task or the domain in which you're playing the game. So if I'm training a medical procedure, the way that procedure acts out in the game should be really closely related to how it works in real life. Otherwise, we don't have the right transfer happening, because we want people to experience something that is as closely related to the real world situation as possible, so that they can take these skills that they learn from the virtual world into their real world daily practices. I brought some examples from the Gamescore from last year. So this group made a game that wanted to create awareness among young adults about potential negative effects of too much drug use. So what they did was they had a platform game, and there's a drug meter you see in the top right corner of both of the screenshots. And at first, when you take a few drugs, you actually see improvements. So you get a speed boost, or you can jump higher, and the environment becomes cheerful. And then as you take too many drugs, so the meter fills up all the way, the environment becomes dark and gloomy, and the challenges become almost impossible to complete. So you see kind of the drawback of overdoing it. And you see that in some respects this is a simulation of real life. So what they could also do here is place some of the drugs which are displayed as power-ups in such a way that they're really hard to avoid, which could be a kind of metaphor for real life, where it might be difficult at some point to say no to drugs because there's peer pressure, you're in the situation where it's really easy to get drugs, for example. So you could kind of create metaphors for all these aspects from real life, and that would result in a more effective serious game than if you would make a game that just screams at you, hey, drugs are bad, and everything is bad, and there is no realistic representation of how drugs really work. That if you take them in moderation, that you first see positive effects, and then on the long term you see the negative effects. So it's important to create a positive and realistic simulation, so that people can really start thinking and reflecting about it, rather than kind of imposing this persuasive thought on people. This is another example. It's unfortunately in Dutch, but the general idea here is that you have a simulation game that is like Age of Empires, for example, where you go through these different eras. And this was an entertainment series game in which we tried to teach children, or high schoolers, I think, about these different time periods and some typical aspects of these time periods. So this is your basic construction game where you need to build a village and develop it and gather resources. And then to upgrade to the next era, you would not only have to gather certain resources and build certain objects, but you would also have to answer a few questions about the era you're currently in. So only once you master the current era, not only in building everything that should be built, but also gathering all the knowledge that should be gathered. And you gather this knowledge by interacting with the different people and objects that are in your current era. Only then can you upgrade to the next one and then learn again. So this is kind of a playful way of embedding all of the knowledge from boring history textbooks into a game. And the third one is not a screenshot from the actual game, but interestingly enough, this was an add-on for The Sims, so it wasn't an independent game. And the idea was to include a layer of environmental awareness or sustainability into it. So what this group did was they looked at The Sims and they identified all kinds of game elements, like these life goals, objects you can buy, activities you can perform, topics you can discuss with other Sims, and added sustainable options to them to make people aware of these choices that they have in daily life, of living a more sustainable life versus living a less sustainable life, and also confronting people with the fact that these are a lot of options that you can make on a daily basis. And also, again here, the idea was that to create a realistic simulation. So not by offering everyone to put solar panels on their house and it didn't cost anything and everyone would just simply go for it, but it's really a trade-off. So you pay for these solar panels, and then only on the longer term they start paying off and saving you money. So just like in real life, as the sim, you have to consider, is it worth the investment for me at this point or not? So again, a realistic representation of how these decisions get made in real life. And this is a screenshot of an actual add-on that was published after my students came up with this idea. So apparently the creator of The Sims also liked this angle, and they made an expansion pack that is all about sustainable living. So it's interesting to see how the ideas that students come up with also have the potential to take off in real life. Okay, thank you for watching, and I will see you in the last video.